I've been in an air-conditioned office all day, and now I'm sat at home, and I'm suddenly like already drenched in sweat.
I'm sitting in my.
Have you been working from home?
I have been. I'm sitting topless currently, which is helping somewhat. You can't do that in an office, you see.
Nice.
I'm surprised people are going in. I'm surprised this was even a conversation. I had a conversation with somebody at the weekend who was saying that they were thinking of going in, but like I don't think that the air conditioning is worth it in the office for the commute or anything else.
I'm not gonna lie, I've been so like practically Baltic temperatures today. I've been so like nice and cool, and then coming out leaving the office, like when you go on holiday and you step off the plane and you're just blasted with warm air.
Sure.
That's what it felt like leaving the office today.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar experience going out to the shops, and yeah, I mean, it's more than anything I've experienced on a holiday. It's like a whole other level.
It was really weird getting the flight yesterday, leaving Paris, and then the pilot was like, "Oh, the weather in Manchester is the same as it is here, so no noticeable difference." I'm like, "That's not normal. That's a really odd thing to hear." It's it feels a little bit like to a lesser extent the kind of okay, to a far lesser extent, but kind of I've been picking up similar vibes to like with the COVID stuff, where like the rolling news is all like warnings and like, oh, here's how to like stay safe and keep indoors, and it's all anyone's talking about. Like it's literally all that it's all we're talking about right now is how hot it is.
I've definitely noticed this that and maybe it's always been this way. I'm sure it has been, but I've never noticed before just how much the media loves a sensation. You know, like a huge, chaotic, apocalyptic event to be happening. Because I think part of the reason why it always feels like there are these apocalyptic events happening might be in part because they are, but also is because there is a whole kind of I want to say media machine, but without sounding too negative and conspiratorial. But there's a whole machine built around sort of profiting off the kind of chaos and the apocalyptic visions. Even the BBC falls into it sometimes, which shocks me because it should kind of stand outside of that. Not to say that this isn't a very serious incident, but it's just a general style of journalism, like a sensationalism, I suppose.
In a way, though, you know that quote that's like, never assign malice to something that you could assign to ignorance or like stupidity or something like that. I think it's similar to that in the sense that it's like, don't assign like a conspiracy theory malice to what is probably people in a newsroom going, what the fuck can we write about? Oh, thank God there's a disaster. We can just keep this as rolling news for 24 hours. Because, like, you know, because you can imagine, otherwise they're like, oh God, what happened today? A cat was stuck up a tree. Can we spin that at all? Not really. It's not interesting enough. So at least when something goes wrong, I just have a feeling it's just like, right, stick that on the live news feed. That's going to be our story for the day. We can just keep pumping out advice on how to stay cool in a heat wave.
I don't think we've mentioned The Thick of It yet on this podcast, but I actually think this is one of the many things that The Thick of It satirizes incredibly well, is the role that the media actually plays in creating chaos rather than just reporting on chaos. And you don't, like, it took me ages to really realize that's a big part of like what The Thick of It sort of comments on, because the media don't play a huge part, but they're pretty much there in the background of every episode. What's happening is that they're responding to bad headlines, or you know, a certain incident that's been quoted in a paper, a certain source,
or trying to preempt them. Like all their actions are dictated by avoiding certain headlines and stuff.
Exactly. And so I guess journalists see themselves as these kind of post-Watergate fighters and defenders of freedom, whereas in fact they're often adding to a slowly decaying democratic system, I suppose. And that definitely seems like one of the theses at the back of The Thick of It, and it sort of makes its case very well.
Yeah, we're straight off into a heavy topic at the top end of the Not to get too political or anything, you know.
The heat's got me down. It's
I mean, the temptation to bring up what's going on in current British politics once you start talking about the thick of it and the way it does satirize a little.
Yeah.
Temptation's really high, but at the same time, I don't want to get into it. And for the reasons of talking politics isn't necessarily always fun unless you're specifically looking for that. And also, I forgot what my other point was going to be. It's too hot.
I think this is worth noting to any remaining listeners that I'm struggling to think today. I'm sure everybody else is struggling to think today. If they were listening today, I'm sure they would be struggling to listen as well. It is just so hard to do anything today. It's
You ever have that thing where like you're listening with headphones in and it's so hot and sweaty that your headphones fall out, your earphones fall out because you're just sweating? And is that just me?
my earphones fall out all the time anyway. I think I've got odd-shaped ears, concerningly odd-shaped ears. It's a real problem.
The thing about headphones is it's one of those things where you wish you could kind of ask your friends if you can. I mean, I'm sure you can borrow Hannah's, but you wish you could kind of ask around to borrow them, but at the same time, no one wants to like share anything that goes in your ear, really. Like you want to try before you buy.
It does feel weird. You can get them secondhand on Amazon, but it's not something you necessarily want. It's like getting a secondhand toothbrush. It's just not right.
Secondhand socks. Do you reckon that's like a similar thing?
Yeah, probably. Secondhand pants.
Secondhand pants, definitely a no-go. Secondhand toothbrush surely doesn't exist. Surely you can't do secondhand toothbrush.
I'm going to look it up.
Have a quick eBay.
Electric toothbrushes are really expensive. I bet people sell at least the handle, which does feel less weird, but somehow just would get me still feeling kind of odd.
It would hit you with the...
It doesn't come up. Instead, I'm getting a lot of brush cutters. I don't know. I think they might mean a bush cutter. Yeah, there's a lot of brush cutters, which look to me a lot like bush cutters. So that must be a common typo there.
Unless it's like a specific thing for trimming paintbrushes. You know those big-ass paintbrushes that you use to just like slap paint on a wall? And occasionally, I don't know why you'd need to trim them though, to be fair. It's not like they grow.
It's not like it grows back. Yeah.
Just chatting absolute bollocks in the heat, man. It's all just coming out. You've been up to most this weekend?
Yeah, so we saw each other since we last recorded. Thank you again for coming down. I was then incredibly ill after that.
Yeah, I hope that wasn't us. If it was us, it was definitely Sam.
No,
for the record.
I'm more worried that I might have given you guys something, so hopefully you're all in the clear, because I think I must have had something there coming on before then. But it was basically a hangover that then just morphed into an illness. Didn't seem to be COVID, tested lots of times, but I don't really trust the tests anymore.
Yeah, they're pretty dodgy.
I was ill for a week, and then at the weekend I managed to get out a bit. I went to Lambeth Country Fair.
Ooh, what's at Lambeth Country Fair?
Well, it's a country fair, but it's in Lambeth.
Yeah, but what?
Surreal.
No, I get... What is there though? Like, what do they do? Like, I don't really know what's at a country fair. I don't really go to many of them, if I'm being honest.
It seemed to have like a whole mix. I mean, the important detail I've left out is that it was free, which is always great.
Ooh.
I know, it was fantastic. Basically has a lot of stuff that festivals have in terms of sort of drinks and food stalls, but also performing sheep. I saw a sheep that could nod on demand.
Wow. I was going to ask if the animals were out.
Yeah. The sheep were the most impressive thing. It seemed a bit cruel, but still impressive.
Yeah.
They've got to make sacrifices for art, you know. And then we saw vegetable carving competition. So there was a lot of people who had carved out vegetables into various iconic figures. A lot of Tom Cruise's, interestingly. So one of them was Crop Gun. I need the Swede. I need the need for Swede. Gave away the punchline before you went there.
Oh, I love it. I feel like Tom Cruise has quite a carvable face. You know, it's very angular.
I think it was as much just because of Top Gun. I don't know how this new Top Gun's just been a whole sensation. You went to see it, didn't you? Am I imagining that?
Imagining that. I've not seen it. I've not even seen the first one.
Oh, you need to get on that. The first one's the ultimate in 80s camp / American military industrial complex propaganda.
Homoerotic.
Yeah, and homoeroticism.
Yeah. I don't think you could get anything more homoerotic, especially because it's not trying to be. Like, not intentionally. I think it's like a bit of subliminal homoeroticism in there, by accident. The director didn't realise.
I've heard this new one sort of wears it a bit, but I don't know how much that's true. But I feel like they must be aware of it. They must be.
You couldn't not lean into it, could you? Like, you can't remake or sequel Top Gun without having some oily boys on the beach. Batting a ball.
It's the new guy. The guy from Whiplash supposedly is very good looking in it. I've forgotten his name. But
Miles Teller?
He's taking. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's quite a funny looking fella, so it's kind of surprised me. But yeah, he's the new kid on the block.
But you're feeling all better now then?
Much better, apart from the occasional sniffing, which will be a nightmare for you to edit out. So I think people are going to have to be subjected to me just.
It's okay. I've got all the time. You son of a bitch. I'm going to leave that one in. I was in Paris at the weekend.
Yeah, how was that?
It was a very brief little stint. It was really nice, but basically flew out on the Friday, so took a half day from work on the Friday. Turned out flying with Ryanair for, cheap. And I didn't really look at the airports because I assumed I was flying to Paris. Turned out they fly to Paris, I don't know how it's pronounced, Bouvier, something like that. Bivoy, something, I don't know. A French word. Basically, it's just a completely separate city near-ish Paris. It's like with Luton and London.
Yeah.
If you fly to Luton Airport, it's technically a London airport, but it's miles out. So it meant that I had to get a coach from the airport into Paris, which was like a 2-hour coach journey. So that meant that getting there and getting back was more of a full day's expedition, including obviously wait times at the airport and stuff like that. So it felt like a lot of traveling, but it was definitely worth it. Basically had Friday traveling and Sunday traveling, but spent Saturday and we did a full day. Met with one of my friends and her sister, and it was just a bit of a whistle stop round, but I've been to Paris before, so I wasn't too fussed. It was just nice to have a little bit of it felt like a day trip, and it feels very surreal that I was there at the weekend. Did the Frenchy things, had a coffee, had a pain au chocolat underneath the Eiffel Tower, went to some museums, went to the Jewish Quarter, which was really nice. I'd recommend if you're ever going for a slower Paris trip and you don't want to do the usual touristy stuff. I'd say go to the Jewish Quarter because it's the only part of Paris that wasn't demolished during that like big renovation that took place in the 1800s, I think it was.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Unlike the rest of Paris, which was like, you know, all knocked down and rebuilt into these kind of very open areas with new parks and wide avenues and stuff. The Jewish Quarter is just like your kind of very kind of classic European city, narrow alleyways and like wonky buildings, and it just means that it has a lot more charm to it. So it felt quite like, it's not fair to say authentic, because obviously the rest of Paris is authentic to itself, but like it felt a little bit more like an interesting cultural corner of the city that's worth exploring. I think most people probably miss when they go and do the
amazing,
you know.
And that's a good hot tip, because I feel like that is my concern about Paris. I'm not sure how fussed I would be about the fully touristy aspects of it. I'd feel like I have to do it in the same way that when you come to London for the first time. Yeah, I guess you have to do all of those things. But if I was taking somebody around London after that,
you have to tick off the big sites.
Yeah, you got to do it once, but it just feels not worth your time really after that. It's not, for want of a better word, the true experience.
I always enjoy a city more when you can kind of mooch around it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Then you can like mooch around, take your time, have a coffee, have a beer, do some people watching, wander along the river at your own pace, taking like the actual city rather than the sights, and not queue up for hours to like see some, you know, marble archway that you could have just Googled. I like the shit that you don't see online, you know, the cool doors and shit, you know. The kooky little
Yeah.
shops that you just find like on a street corner that sell our little artisanal goods that are homemade. Those kind of stuff. That's where the real kind of joy of weekend breaks and stuff comes, I think, for me personally.
It's the general tourist paradox, which is, as a tourist, I think you want to pretend to not be a tourist, essentially, which is then simultaneously a very touristy thing to do. This kind of slightly forced, I'm experiencing a city, which nobody takes their time to do if they actually live in the city.
Yeah.
But also this whole thing that I'm very guilty of going to a place and going, oh, it's lovely, but it was a bit ruined by the tourists. I do that all the time. I think more of something else entirely.
Shall we discuss the album?
Let's do it. And I think that this is the point when we should have the jingle. I think if we're going to put it in, I think we put it in about halfway through the episode. I'm not certain about that, but part of me wants to try it.
We can
Really
play
shock
with it, yeah?
people
I'm happy to...
with the jingle.
Should we have it really loud to like jolt people out of the stupor that they found?
Not overwhelmingly loud. I'd keep it maybe just a tiny little boost, like a tiny jolt. Don't do a full kind of 20-30
Did I bass boost
video.
it?
Yeah. No,
Deep
no,
fry.
don't do that. This is a beautiful Gregorian jingle.
Do you want to introduce us to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire by Chinatown Slalom?
Yeah, go on. This was an album I discovered through my Spotify Discover Weekly, I think.
Oh.
Back in a phase when I first discovered that. And it just went through a period of seeming to churn up really good stuff. And I think I kind of clocked that as you use it, it gets better. And so there was this period for a few months after uni, basically, and pre-pandemic, when I started using it.
Were you feeding the algorithm?
Exactly. And it churned out Where You At by Chinatown Slalom. I got very hooked. I listened to the album. I got incredibly obsessed.
Really?
I'm a little unsure why I got so obsessed. Yes, yeah, really. I got completely hooked.
Specifically with this album or with the artist in general?
Just this album. They released an EP not that long ago that I found incredibly disappointing.
Really?
Sorry, guys, if they're listening. Yeah.
Ooh, this is interesting. This is changing my perspective.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, well, I'd love to hear more. I think that's actually probably all the introduction it needs, other than we went to see them in Manchester in quite a small venue.
Oh, how were they live?
Kind of suited. Interesting. Quite, very good. Lots of energy.
Yeah.
And they apologized for the raps after doing the two songs that have raps in them. They basically went, that's all the rapping you're getting today, don't worry.
Was the rapping awful?
But they were incredible. No, it was amazing. It was really good. I mean, it's just quite surreal rapping. It's not like particularly if it was like these sort of white guys sort of taking it really seriously, but it's cartoonish almost.
Yes.
Almost a sort of MF Doom and Madlib vibe on that first track with the high-pitched vocal, very like Madlib's alter ego, Quasimodo.
I like that you said it was like cartoonish, because that's definitely one of the words that I've kind of written down. So again, this is another one that I'd never heard before, never heard of the artist or the album, which is why I was like kind of confused by it when you first mentioned it 2 weeks ago, as to which way round was the album title and which way was the artist. Although I don't know why, but the album art is oddly like familiar. So I don't know if I've seen it on a Discover Weekly playlist or on your phone when you've been playing music in the park, or I don't know. I was just like, I've definitely seen this album art before. Maybe it's just the color pattern, but I don't know.
I think it has got a familiar vibe. It to me, it almost looks like a modern classic album cover. I can't quite explain it, but it looks like something that would appear on, are you aware of this not that I use 4chan, let's just nip that in the bud before I've even said this, but are you aware of the whole music message board?
Yeah, I'm aware of it,
top albums list. It kind of informs a lot of music discussion on the internet, regardless of 4chan. I mean, it informs Fantano, for example. But it's the sort of album that you can imagine appearing on there, I'd say.
It is something like of a weirdly, iconic album for an album that I assume most people haven't heard of, and fewer still have listened to. I mean, the songs have got like a fair few plays, but there is still some like very small. This is probably the least played of the three. Obviously, we did Mac Miller last time, who's massive, and Lamb Chop are also like have a major audience. Whereas on here, we've got songs that only have like 48,000 plays, which is like, quite small scale. Although Where You At does have 4 million, which is, and that's the one that you found on Discover Weekly.
It was, yeah. I think it's also arguably, it's amongst the most accessible. I think that one and, I don't know how true that is actually. It kind of just works the best, I think, arguably. It's probably my favourite on there.
I think, of all the ideas presented, Where You Are, it's the one that kind of culminates the best. It's like, I think every single song on this album is very much kind of working off the same ideas and like the same kind of production like values, and all to kind of achieve different things, but they all kind of clearly have the same thinking and formula behind them. And so that's for that reason, I think saying that Where You Are is the most successful of them. The way the ideas come together in the production and in the song feel kind of the most well-rounded and like clean sounding and most fleshed out on Where You At. Whereas some of the other songs, I enjoy all of them, but some of the other songs feel a little bit more like they're still kind of like finding their feet a little bit. It hasn't quite landed as nicely as Where You At does.
I think something to note on that, or two things actually. I think you've immediately sort of hit the nail on the head where you were commenting on. It's the one with where the ideas come to fruition the best, or however you phrased it. It is an album of ideas, I suppose. It is almost like an album of sketches. It's kind of like the modern equivalent of a jam album, because it's an album that's clearly been made with a bunch of mates throwing ideas together, but then painstakingly piecing it all together because it's music production. I think they all studied music production. That's the other context. And so I suppose it's almost like the jam album of bedroom pop. I think that would be quite a good tagline.
You're rephrasing back to me in more eloquent words what I wrote down while listening to this on the train.
Amazing.
I wrote down, gives the impression of friends having fun, bedroom pop, experimental bedroom pop ?
Spot on.
Which is just, and you just said that back to me. It does sound like, I think, because I read up on the band, and again, quite a small band, so like the reading was very much some kind of interviews and articles rather than like, they didn't just have like a Wikipedia page or anything like, to the point. It was like interviews with them and stuff. There was one in particular, I can't remember the site. It was very overwritten, which I think's quite common for music articles. It went a little bit over the top, describing them all as various members of the Beatles, but mixed with other artists.
Sure.
But anyway, just like physical appearance wise. But while like obviously reading up on that, like finding out that they were all first year students when they met, and I think it was like within 2 weeks of Freshers Week, or like even the week after Freshers Week, that they'd met and then recorded Dr. Marvello and his best friend Corky.
Yeah.
And it really does sound like two mates who've met and are just like rapping over a sample in just how like fun and carefree it is. I think that's what's so charming about that song and the whole album, is that it feels very fun and carefree and thrown together. And like you said, it just feels like it's a bunch of ideas and a bit of a jam session, and they're just kind of feeling out, how does this sound together? What does this sound like? Bring that in.
Yeah, that's fully it. The fun of it, I suppose. And that first song in particular, one of the things that I love about it is that it reminds me a lot of what me and Ben used to do, but if me and Ben had music production degrees. It's just so chaotic. It's a sample from a Canadian progressive / psychedelic rock band Klaatu, and it's a completely ill-fitting sample in if it were done by anybody else. I think the idea that they heard that and were just like, oh, that's perfect sample for a beat. It's just amazing.
It's the fact that they didn't even hear it and think, oh, it's a perfect sample for a beat. They had it on at a party and just started rapping over it.
Is that how it started?
Just like off the cuff. Apparently so. Which I think, you can pick that up when you listen to it. It was like completely impromptu, which I love. And I was going to make the comparison to you and Ben, and I was going to hold off until you brought it up, because last time I said like, oh, Flotus sounds like, it gives me Ronan vibes. And you're like, oh, I'd never really realized. But like this album, not to say you were necessarily like influenced by it, but like it has the same charm that a lot of Oozborn Mafia's stuff has.
They were influenced by us,
just
mate.
two friends.
They were influenced by us. They came after us.
Yeah, you came first. Yeah, but it has the same charm. Absolutely, it just feels authentic. It feels very, very authentic.
And the lyrics are kind of just so surreal and such a piss take on that first tune, without necessarily just being a comedy act. Which again is kind of sort of what Ben and I were like. It's sort of just having fun with it. So one of the lines, I just had to look it up because I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's literally just a series of words. None of it really makes sense, but where the high-pitched voice goes, emo, albino, Marilyn Monroe, flamenco. It's just got a beautiful flow to it, and it's such a surreal, like, fast flash of images. I do love that.
I think the whole album feels very a cappella. Obviously very heavily sample based, and then a lot of very interesting, quirky instrumentation, just occasionally throwing trumpets in wherever you feel like it, wherever it suits. And it does all fit, like it all comes together. But then also just like lots and lots of use of vocals as an instrument, whether that's like just doing little like vocal melodies that like dum dum dum, shit like that, or literally just using like what sounds like voice recordings from their recording sessions, or maybe just from like around the house, or like doing uni shit, like using that to kind of create this kind of certain points strangely ethereal, nostalgic backing for like the intros and outros and songs, and even some of like the middle parts.
I think that's one of the things, and I suppose this is something we're going to keep on coming back to, but it's just yet another thing that does add to that feel of almost like a jam session. And part of it comes from their music production skill, that they're able to take what starts as just somebody humming along a tune. So you can imagine it's a bunch of mates essentially stoned together every night, and then one of them will go, "People always say what you want," which is the final song. And they just do that. They just have a little vocal refrain. It's like, oh yeah, there's something in that. And then they just keep on going, and then you build a song out of it. And they've got the sort of technical know-how to really follow that through. But more broadly than that, that's just a universal thing. I think anybody can just think of a few melodies that kind of sound good, and then the working on them is perhaps less universal. It almost feels sort of punk in its DIY aesthetic. It's like punk 40 years on, when suddenly being DIY doesn't mean that you can only play 3 chords. Being DIY is actually something that can be very technically advanced, because people have the technology for it now. And it's actually something that, just to give a bit of continuity, that Mr. Lamchop mentioned about the state of music production now, just means that the possibilities are endless.
This is how people who are maybe in like a less privileged position, or just starting out in the industry, for example, a group of lads in their first year of university at Liverpool, can hop in. And despite it being like a very, like you say, I think you hit the nail on the head with describing it as like a DIY album. Like it does feel very DIY, but it also, I'm pleasantly surprised by how clean the production is. The mixing and mastering is pretty spot on, and I don't know if that's like happened since they've like gained success with songs and then they were able to get it like professionally done. But like the album as it exists on Spotify, or whichever music streaming service you prefer to use, as it exists, it sounds really like crisp and professional, while also like it's kind of the ideas behind it and the instruments used and the way it's all used that sounds DIY and experimental. And then but with it being brought together, it's nice and clean, which I think I'm just picking up on because I feel like I've listened to a lot of like upcoming artists or like smaller artists on something like SoundCloud, and sometimes it's a bit muddier or they've not had the time to like clean up the production as much. So I don't know. It just felt like an interesting blend of worlds when you do have this kind of very I keep going back to DIY, but it's the perfect way to describe it. DIY feel versus kind of the clean production values of what feels like a more professional kind of debut.
No, exactly. I think it actually highlights something that, yeah, using DIY one more time, I'm sure people are getting sick of us saying DIY, but DIY would have
It's too
once
hard to
meant,
think of a different word.
yeah, DIY would have once meant lo-fi, I suppose. The two words would almost
Yeah.
be synonymous. Whereas what's interesting about this is it reveals that DIY doesn't necessarily mean lo-fi. In fact, in this case, it means distinctly hi-fi. It's one of the best produced albums and best mastered albums in terms of just all of, you know, put your headphones on, all of the sounds together. Probably one of the best of both of those that I know, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it really, I get this feeling with Tame Impala sometimes where I think it really exemplifies modern production techniques in a perfect package. Tame Impala is very like that. And the other thing that's interesting about that is that it reveals that these terms, lo-fi in particular, are now aesthetics. They're not a descriptor of the way that something's produced. It's a whole aesthetic world of its own. Hence how you get lo-fi hip-hop and you get SoundCloud rap where it relishes in the lo-fi aesthetics. And, you know, people often purposefully produce in lower quality to create a certain sound. It often creates a nostalgic fuzz, I suppose, would be the common theme of lo-fi
nostalgic fuzz is
aesthetics.
definitely what I think of when discussing lo-fi.
But that's fascinating, the way that something can evolve from, you can see the journey from a product of practicality. You know, people only had certain resources, so that the sound they made ended up lo-fi. People then discover something about that lo-fi sound. It sort of evokes a certain emotion or whatever it might be, and it certainly evokes a certain emotion in the context of culture and changing culture, because people look back to, say, certain eras of cassette tapes, and suddenly it evokes that flashback to that time, even if you weren't in that time. Another artist that did this, at least early on, would be sort of Ross and Friends and all of those other kind of lo-fi house artists, which were essentially playing with the aesthetics of a certain era of people handing around tapes, and it just having this that warm fuzz, a bit like when you hear music coming from the other room of a house party.
Yeah.
And it comes through the walls, and you just get this light thumping. And
have you seen that there's like a large amount of YouTube videos that recreate that? They're all titled things like, you're at a party, you're in the bathroom, it's 3 a.m. and they're playing Arctic Monkeys in the other room, and then they've just like put like a filter on the noise and like increase the bass.
Yes. Yeah,
just to tickle that nostalgic fuzz feeling.
I've seen a very similar one with Redbone. That would be like something that gives me an ASMR-like effect. It's not only like a physical feeling, it's also this broader emotional feeling, and it's really hard to pinpoint, but it really does
the warm
something to
and
me.
fuzzies. Yeah.
But also like a nostalgia, so there's a sort of bittersweet or melancholic element to it as well. It's a bit like watching childhood film that used to evoke strong emotions in you, and you suddenly get a taste of those strong emotions. Yeah. That's a more depressing way of describing it, but I think that's part of what it does. So something like that will give you the emotions, a sudden fleeting glimpse of those strong emotions you felt as a teenager, or kind of a uni student, or whenever you were sort of attending house parties, and you get a taste of it, but it's like you're experiencing it secondhand almost.
What would you say the vibe of the album is, and like when would you choose to listen to it? When you became obsessed with it, was it your like walking to uni songs? Was it your cooking in the kitchen songs? Was it your like chilling in the park? Like, what if you're going to recommend to someone, oh, wait for this kind of weather, for example, like when would you say to someone to put this album on?
I think it feels pretty appropriate for the summer weather. I think Dr. Marvolo and Where You At and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire regularly make it onto my summery-ish playlists. So I'd say summery.
Which one came on while we were at yours in London?
Dr. Marvolo.
Okay.
Which is why I almost considered whether I should have mentioned it, because I'm not. That would throw you off in terms of your impression of the album, I think.
When it came on, I remember distinctly. I mean, to be fair, it's one of those things where it came on and it was very much like in the background while everything else was going on. So I couldn't like concentrate, listen to it. So it was more about kind of the that kind of impression it gave off while it was in the background. And weirdly, it gave me like a little bit of kind of reminded me a little bit of Injury Reserve, which I feel none of the rest of the album. That's the thing. Like at
Yeah.
first, I was like, "Oh, this makes me think of Injury Reserve," and I thought that was going to be like a really kind of neat parallel to draw. And then going away and listening to the rest of the album, not even remotely in the same ballpark. But I think it was just something about like that kind of almost chaotic production in Dr. Marvelo that does invoke that a little bit, because Injury Reserve, especially their like most recent album, there's a lot of songs on there like Superman That, which are quite noisy and complicated, and that's what kind of Dr. Marvelo kind of came off at us at the time. But yeah, then since going away and giving it a long listen, I definitely agree. It feels like a summary album, but again, that might be influenced by the fact that I've been listening to it while it's been absolutely glorious outside. But I think there's like an element of the production that's like, it's very loud and it's very bright. So it feels like you couldn't, I'd feel like there'd be a mismatch between putting it on like a rainy day or like a dark wintry night, because it feels like the kind of thing that you want to be putting on your speaker in the park and just kind of bopping along to, riding around on your bike with listening to it, maybe having a burger, a barbecue. Very it's very expressive music, and I feel like you want to be in the kind of place where you can be like express along with it.
Shout out to our sponsors this week, McDonald's. That was the required burger reference. Yeah. We've met our contract now. Now give us our free mozzarella sticks.
I was thinking more barbecue burger, but yeah, I'll take some McDonald's money.
I'm actually not a very big McDonald's fan, so
don't say that. What if
I would actually?
Ronan, what if down the line they want to sponsor us? You don't.
Oh yeah, bugger.
You don't want to strike yourself off the list too early.
Would we take it? You know what? I'm going to take a moral stand here. Not that I don't even know what's wrong with McDonald's. They just seem so supremely capitalist. I'm just going to put my foot down against that. Generically speaking.
Well, just McDonald's in general.
We don't want the many sponsors that you've been giving us, McDonald's. We don't want them. We reject them.
You can take your sponsorships.
You can keep offering.
And shove them up your ass.
Right on. We've still got a revolutionary spirit, Louis.
Yeah, we do. We have a revolutionary spirit until people start offering us money, and then it might change.
Oh God, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Should we do favorite songs, and then I have got some facts as well, or the quiz.
Oh, nice. I am quickly trying to see that. So I scribbled some notes while I was listening on the train. I was getting some funny looks off the other people on the train. But fuck them. I do a fun podcast with my friends, so they can go for themselves. Oh yeah, there was particularly, I think it's at the end of Dr. Marvelo and his friend Corky, where. And I think this ties into what you were saying about when they apologized live for the raps, is at the end, there was a line that's like, and it's like what I was saying earlier about like a little bit of like recorded audio from the recording session kind of added in. And it finishes up by, that's a rap. Do you get it? And I thought that was an endearingly lame statement.
Yeah.
I thought, like, it was not like a cool way to wrap the song up. But because of that, it was like, oh, like, bless him. It's a little bit of pitter-patter, and I like a little bit of pitter-patter. And it made me think that they probably would be quite fun to see live.
They definitely, gave off that energy live. They seemed stoned as anything live as well, which also fits my general image of them and of that joke. I think in keeping with the cartoon image earlier, another word for them would be goofy, I guess.
Goofy.
It's a sort
Oh
of
my
goofy
god,
vibe.
Goofy's the perfect. It's the goofiest album.
It's like a stoner's goofiness, I think. They do just come across incredibly stoned a lot of the time to me.
I mean, when you describe the image of them sat around in their room and just make like humming melodies and then go, oh, that sounds like something, that basically felt like you hit the nail on the head. Like as soon as you described that, it's almost like you reversed engineered the process of every single song.
They've got a good pop melody and they just craft a tune out of it, I guess, and that's a common theme throughout the album. You know, it's not unpoppy. I'd say it's, you know,
Oh my
the
god,
whole
yeah.
album's, you know, poppy in a sense.
It's absolutely bedroom pop, yeah. It's just kind of a bit more kind of funky experimental bedroom pop than you're probably used to, which is nice. It's like they do a lot of instrumental switch ups that kind of like grabs your attention and kind of make sure that you're still listening, and like there's no point where you start like sinking into like a rhythm of what's going on and you don't stand up kind of getting there's no boring songs. And I also enjoyed the fact that like compared to the previous two albums, well, the album and the mixtape we've covered, this one was really nice and short. Like it's 28 minutes and 55 seconds, which just meant that it was like very listenable because you can just get through the track and you're like, oh, I'm already done. I'll give it another listen. Like, because we've done two like very long projects previously, which are always enjoyable to listen through in their own right. But like, I think sometimes it's nice to have something very accessible and just like snappy, I guess would be the word. In a way, I'm grateful for not to imply that like the other ones were too long, because I think they work really, really well. I'm saying like in this context, in this album, I'm grateful that the songs are shorter and that the album's shorter, because I think if there were more songs in the album, or if any of these songs were longer, they'd overstay their welcome.
Yeah,
I think
right
they're like the perfect length to have this kind of playful, experimental, jumpy, funky production. Like if they dragged on, if it kept going, I'd be like, okay, I get it now. So it works as a snappy album. And I kind of want to, before we go on to like favorite songs and stuff, I do want to just circle back to something you said at the start where you were talking about how they released a more recent EP and you were disappointed by it. I found that interesting because when I heard this album, it very much felt to me like a starting album. Like these boys, these Liverpool boys, they're fresh on the scene. They've got these fresh ideas, some snappy takes, and they've been throwing it all together. They've thrown it into a little album, and they've put it out there for the world to hear and to judge. And then they're going to kind of work on these ideas. That's what it felt like. It felt like this was a starting point, and they had some really fun, interesting like ways they could take this and like develop. And it was almost like this, like it felt a little bit like prototypey. And so it's interesting to hear that for you, their follow-up was a disappointment. But I don't know, like, was it a disappointment because it was more of the same, or was it like you didn't like the direction they went in, or
it's almost like they heard somebody, or they had their label have exactly that talk that you've just given to them, and then responded to that by distilling some of their most sort of pleasant and sort of likable parts on one level, but reducing their songs to just that, I suppose. And at that point, it doesn't feel as pleasant and as likable. I mean, I put one or two of the songs on playlists when it came out, and it could also be that album came out at just the right time and just the right place, and it just fit. I think in the same way that Discover Weekly probably does, if it has any flaws, it does just hold a mirror up to where you are at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
It could be that as a consequence, that whole album was just a mirror to where I was at that point in time.
I mean, the fact that you like became obsessed with it at the time as well.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it was always going to disappoint me, the follow-up, but I think I would have been happy for them just to continue throwing ideas at the page like that. That was what was so fresh and exciting.
Yeah, throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah, and if they're listening, which I'm sure they are, they should be they should be sort of going back to that, or not going back to it, but finding what the new version of that is for them. continuing just to be excited by it all. Look, maybe they were, but I think I saw an interview with them for that newer EP where they said, I mean, I think facetiously, in fairness, and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but they talked a bit about how important it is to sell out, that selling out was part of the process. They were clearly winding the interview up a little bit, but also I think on one level there was some truth in that. I think they'd thought they needed to sell out. That was part of like growing up, or they needed to simplify and they needed to just produce traditional songs, and that was the sort of grown up and the logical next step. I don't think they did need to do that, and actually this sort of success on their Spotify page seems to suggest that they didn't. You know, their most successful stuff is still from that first
by a long shot
album, and it is just the best stuff. It is the most interesting stuff. So there's a lesson in there somewhere.
They're definitely a band to still keep an eye on.
Oh, definitely.
We'll see where. I reckon, you know, they've definitely got some projects in them still to go. Maybe they'll come back with a big hitter down the line.
I think they have that potential. I mean, actually, the reason I stopped myself when I said that Where You At is the most poppy tune or the most accessible tune in the album is because I think Who Wants to Be a Millionaire might be the perfect late 2010s indie track. I think it does everything that all of these other indie pop, kind of vaguely electronic, vaguely sort of guitars, vaguely rhythmic, but ultimately just very melodic artists try to do. And it does it all in one song. I just think it's a banging pop tune. It's an incredible, or sort of indie pop tune. It's just an incredible song. If they were able to keep on turning stuff out like that, they would go very far within that kind of market. But who knows?
Yeah, they've definitely proven themselves as being very talented. It's just where they take it.
That's the thing. It's not that, like, I mean, they are commercially viable doing just what they were doing. I think that's my general take.
What are your... Do you want to, like, pick some favourites then? Favourite tracks?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of probably already mentioned it, but I'd go Dr. Marvolo, Where You At, and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I think they're the kind of standout tracks of the album for me.
Might be a bit of a rogue choice, but I think my favourite tune was 8:30.
Okay. Is that the sort of Radioheady heavy guitar one?
Yes.
It reminds me a lot of Radiohead. I don't know why.
Yes, that's
and then it has this sort of choral choir.
It does have a bit of like ethereal Radioheadness to it. Yeah.
It's the vocals in particular.
I think it struck a chord just because it kind of stood out amongst the other songs as having a bit of a different flair to it, and it kind of grabbed my attention again.
I've got to say that was one I'd largely slept on. It was incredible when I saw it live. Absolutely incredible.
When they perform live, is it with instrument?
Yeah. I can't remember whether there might have been one guy with a laptop, maybe, but otherwise everybody else had instruments, I think. And there was a guy with a sax there, which is very impressive. And one of the guys drumming was the high-pitched rapper. So that was quite impressive to see the drumming whilst rapping at the same time.
Good shit. I thank you for the recommendation.
Are you ready for the quiz?
I am ready for the quiz.
Amazing. Oh, we should really have a jingle for the quiz as well. I'll try and think of that one at some point.
I like the idea of breaking up the sections with different... It's the quiz time.
Yeah.
No.
That works.
We can do better. No, it doesn't.
It's that now.
We'll come back to it. We'll circle around.
Okay.
Living jingles. They evolve with time.
So I've got questions here that cover different parts of the title of the band and the title of the album.
Okay.
So first question, this isn't that fun one, but I was just trying to think of one related to Chinatowns.
Yeah.
From which film does the line "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown" come from?
Oh my god! Why can I can picture what movie I want to. I can picture the answer I want to give, but I can't think of the exact big thingy in Little China. What the fuck is it called?
I can give a clue if you want. It's not a trick question.
Is it just called Chinatown? Is that even a movie?
Spot on, Donnie.
Yay!
It is called Chinatown.
I'm off to the races.
The second one. I think you've got a chance of some of these. That one was one of them.
I might have to go back and like count up the score.
Well.
We might have to do like a running total of how we do in each quiz.
Okay.
So like me versus you, and that might convince us to go for harder questions going forward. But
let's do it. We need to get a competitive edge to this. The two countries, according to Wikipedia, the two countries most associated with Millionaire shortbreads are...
Oh. Oh my god. I'm gonna be really disappointed if one of them's England, but it probably is. I want to say Scotland, and I'll say Scotland and England.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
You got it half right. Scotland, definitely. But interestingly, Australia as well.
Really? I'd have never guessed Australia.
Women's Weekly Australia seem to have a large part to play in the creation of, or popularization of, or recording of the Millionaire shortbread.
Shout out to Women's
an
Weekly
article in
Australia.
the 70s. Yeah, our other sponsor for this week. If they're still running, I don't like, who knows?
Who knows?
That's from the 70s. But question number 3: the world gained how many new millionaires during 2020? This is my political fact, because we went through a huge, not just health crisis, but what was also in fact an economic crisis, and we didn't dip in millionaires.
We have
gained this many millionaires.
I want to say it's going to be like a lot, because I think a millionaire. Do you just need 1 million to be a millionaire, or do you need like a few millions? I think you just need one, don't you, to technically be?
I think you just need one, to be fair, and that can be assets as well. So
yeah,
a house or whatever.
So I feel
else.
like probably like. The thing is, I'm gonna say it's gonna be like scarily high, and I'm gonna give a number and then be either miles high or so depressingly low compared to the real answer. I'm gonna say like 20. I'm gonna say I want to say like 15,000.
It's 5.2 million.
Oh my god. Yeah, depressingly low.
That's insane, right?
5.2 million millionaires. That's mental.
There's a great guy on YouTube, I'll send it to Louis to put in the description, who explains why people have got so rich throughout the pandemic. Fact number 4. In a recent study, Mark Zuckerberg was found to be more closely related to this type of lizard than other human beings. Which lizard was it?
Gecko.
Damn right, it's an Andaman day gecko. I mean, I have fully made that up, but that's not important.
Did you actually choose gecko, or were you just going to agree with whatever lizard I said?
No, it's specifically an Andaman day gecko, but I thought I'd be lenient on you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate that, because I wouldn't have gone any more specific than gecko.
There you go. So you learn something new every day. That's the facts. That's all of them there.
Oh, that's the quiz. Shall I give you my album for 2 weeks' time?
Let's hear it.
So, have you listened? I'm going to check real quick first, because I don't want to give you an album that you might have heard lots of before.
Sure.
So have you listened to much Fleet Foxes before?
No, actually, and I've been recommended them before and still not listened to them.
Perfect. Okay, so I've been kind of pondering over which album to pick this week, and I've gone through a few ideas, and I've kept changing my mind, and I'm sure we'll come back to the ones down the line. But in the mood created by this blistering hot summer weather, I've decided to go with my kind of, I don't know why, it just feels super summery, and it feels like it's good music to play when it's hot and yellow outside. You know, when the grass is all yellow.
Yeah.
This is a yellow grass album. You know, that really niche genre. So the album is Helplessness Blues by Fleet Foxes.
Brilliant.
And I think it's one of my favorite albums. So we're going to change up the vibe and go a bit like, it's quite folky.
I'm ready for it. I'm looking forward to this because, yeah, I have been recommended them, and I've heard their names of like that's about all over the place. So, and I do quite like folk, to be honest. My family definitely really sort of likes all of that, and I've grown up with it. So, looking forward to that.
I'm enjoying like the idea of probing each other's interests and being like, here's a recommendation, and seeing at what point we're going to catch the other one by surprise by giving them a genre that kind of throws them off.
I feel like we've talked about it so much, it's going to be hard to do, isn't it? Just over our sort of time knowing each other.
I feel like we both listen to quite a wide variety of music as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't see us catching each other. What it's going to be is when we get guests on and they come on with something just completely left field, and that's going to be when we get pushed out of our comfort zones.
I'm here for it.
I can't really remember what we need to call out. I still haven't set up any social media or anything like that. I don't think we really have like the audience for that, but we do have an email address, more of something else entirely, at gmail.com, all one word. Good luck spelling it. If you want to email in any thoughts, feelings, opinions, if you want to have a go at Ronan for his crazy political beliefs that you expressed early in the podcast that I've probably edited out. We're on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, all of them. Find us on your favorite one. I've also started uploading us to YouTube. Give Who Wants to Be a Millionaire by Chinatown Slalom a listen. I definitely recommend it. It's a really fun summary listen to. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me, Ronan.
Pleasure.
Maybe we need an outro song as well. An outro melody.
Yeah, we need the whole lot. I'll get cracking on it.
These will appear and get scattered into the episode.
Damn straight.
It's lovely.
Of something else entirely.